my name is Ron Burke. I'm the Vice President of Safety and AIM. If you've been following my videos recently, you know that our drivers are competing in a head-to-head matchup that we call Drive for the Crown. Drive for the Crown is a March Madness style competition. It's based on the Netradyne driver scores each week, and from week to week we whittled our field down from 64. We're currently at 8 drivers in the Elite 8 left in the competition. And today I'm joined with a special guest from Netradyne, Adam Lang. He's going to review some of the data and give us some of his insights on what he thinks is happening with our drivers. All right, we're joined here with Adam Lang from Netradyne. And Adam, I appreciate you joining me today. Can you take a few minutes or a few seconds, whatever, and talk about your role at Netradyne and what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, first of all, Ron, thank you so much for having me on your show today. Amazing tournament that you have running, and I see some beautiful competition amongst the drivers that is also friendly and great for your culture. My name's Adam Lang, and my role at Netradyne is to work with fleets like yours that want to practically apply some of the principles of what a safety director might look at while utilizing the Netradyne system. And I can kind of specialize in that because my former life, I was 10 years in transportation safety, HR training, the whole 9 yards. So I've got an interesting perspective on it, and I've also used the Netradyne system in my prior fleet and saw some amazing results. So I'm happy to share those great best practices with fleets like yours, Ron, because you use them and you put them into place by using these creative opportunities and contests to really drive great performance and competition.
Yeah, I appreciate your feedback, Adam. We've always had a lot of conversations and thought up some crazy ideas, and this is one of those. We've put it into place. It's kind of been in the works for a couple of years that I've been talking about this contest. I'm happy to see it come to fruition and that we're actually able to implement it. And the best thing about it to me is that we've seen some improvements in our total numbers, and we shared some analysis back and forth before we had this conversation about our event counts per 1,000 minutes is the metric that we dug into. Can you share some of your thoughts on what we're seeing in that total event and some of the other categories?
Absolutely. So yeah, and for your viewers and listeners, maybe just a quick explanation. When we look at events per 1,000 minutes, we have to pick something that's kind of like universal across the board with a lot of different fleets, whether they're over the road, regional, last mile. And events per 1,000 minutes tends to be a pretty good metric. And if that works for your fleet, Ron, I say go with it. Other fleets might want to do events per 100 minutes, or they might want to look at events per distance travel. It all depends, but you have to look at apples to apples. So when we're comparing your fleet and the top 64, which began this tournament, I see some very interesting and positive numbers. Starting out in July, you had 2 net events per 1,000 minutes with your top 64 performers in this contest.
So
And
what we looked at, right, was only those drivers that made it through that qualifying period for the first couple of months.
Correct.
They were at 2 events per 1,000 minutes driven. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I would say right at 2. I mean, statistically significant 2.0, let's call it.
Okay.
And what's very interesting is let's come to October. And granted, the month of October is far from over, but if we're looking at events per minute, we can equalize that in per 1,000 minutes. So we're seeing almost a 1.08 alerts per 1,000 minutes.
So we cut it in half. We went from 2 to 1 events per 1,000 minutes from July, the month of July, into October.
If I look at your speeding, events per 1,000 minutes, this is a very good indicator. Throughout the year, your fleet speeding alerts has just been dropping with these top 64 drivers, which we want to see. But let's say you had 1.3 speeding alerts in July, which interestingly enough, that accounts for well over 50% of all total alerts, and that's not uncommon in a regional or over the road fleet. Let's just keep that in mind. And you have pretty much cut that in half in October to 0.63 speeding alerts per 1,000 minutes. So again, you are getting a half of a speeding alert in 1,000 minutes, or about, it's taking you about 1,800 minutes to get one speeding alert with those top 64 guys. And you can reverse engineer that math, but to me, that's a long time driving before a speeding alert happens, which means less interaction with law enforcement, less inspections, and hopefully and probably less collisions due to speed as a factor.
Wow. That's interesting because, I think that this somewhat carries over with our total events, not only from the people that are in the top 64, but I think it's affecting the rest of the fleet as well. Don't we see some
Well,
hard braking and some following distance and some other alert types and our total alerts down a little bit in October? Isn't that what we saw?
yeah, we did. We saw some the net events compared from July to October are down, and they're not down with the total fleet as statistically significant as your top 64. And I'd like to remind the viewers too that improvement is kind of like the stock market. If anyone on this call on the show follows the stock market, you know that there's a lot of upward movement, and then you're going to have some downward. And what do? You buy a little bit more and you hope to see more upward movement. So you have peaks and valleys, but always wanting to get that line to the top. And that's what we're seeing with your net events per 1,000 minutes. We saw a little bit of upward movement, but then in October, it's down. It's down by a good amount compared to where it was 5.1 versus 4.7. So that tells me that it's taking root with your entire fleet. Your entire fleet is listening and watching. They may not be participating as much because they feel, well, we're out of the contest. But I would say to those drivers, you've impressed me with your data. And even if you don't have the contest money to go for, you've got something much bigger, and that's your career and your CDL and everything that goes along with being that professional driver is so important. So the encouraging trends I see, I see a little bit of drop in speeding as well, with the drivers that did not make it to the top 64. I see a little bit of a drop with following distance, actually a little bit more than a little bit of a drop. I see 0.27 following distance alerts per 1,000 minute, and in October that's down to 0.17. So
Right.
that's an impressive move right there. And just one more thing, Ron, I really like the fact that let's pick on like an inertial event, like hard turns. Hard turns can result in rollovers, and on the worst days, of course, and on the best days, it might be a little bit harder on your equipment and your fuel efficiency. Well, I saw hard turns between the month of September and October get cut in half per 1,000 minutes with the rest of your fleet that's not in the top 64. So they're handling the equipment less harshly. And that's a win. And then of course your stars per 1,000 minutes have a nice upward trend, both with your top 64 and those that did not make the top 64. We still see a nice curve up with your driver stars. And of course, Netradyne is the only company out there that rewards drivers with driver stars when they do something positive, when they do something right. And we all know that our mistakes can be pointed out very quickly. As humans, that's what we do. We point out mistakes, we look at highlight reels, we chuckle and laugh, but let's recognize the positive for what it is. And you've got some amazing drivers here that are putting up fantastic record-setting numbers, both in the contest and the drivers out of the contest.
Yeah, I agree, Adam. And one of the things that I'm most impressed with in the analysis that we reviewed is that relationship of driver stars between the the drivers that didn't make our contest for the top 64, the ones that just went through the qualifying period and got some extra coaching on how to do well with the camera. They learned a little bit about how to get stars, and it shows because our star number was around half of, or it was around 60% with our non-top 64 guys versus the top 64 drivers. But when we get to the more recent months and the more recent weeks, in October, we had 2.1 stars per 1,000 minutes, but our non-participating, the guys that didn't make it through the 2 months of qualifying, and in October, those drivers achieved 1.3 stars per 1,000 minutes. So they were well over 50% of the very best drivers in the fleet. So they've all raised their game. They're all paying attention to their driving, and they all seem to be, putting in maximum effort, even though the skill levels are different between the top 64 and the people that didn't make, the head-to-head component of the challenge.
Well, your fleet as a whole stepped up and met the challenge, and when the pressure was on and they're under the lights, and the cameras were rolling, so to speak, they're performing, and this is what we hope for. Our goal and your goal and all of our goals should be keep our roadways safe. Make sure at the end of the day the driver gets home to their family, and everyone else on the roadway gets home to their family, their friends, their loved ones. That is the single most important goal, is everyone goes home at the end of the day, end of the evening. And the more that we can do to help that mission, the better it is for everyone. You've got some amazing commercial drivers out there, Ron, that are really taking this contest seriously. And I have to say, it's one of the most creative things that I've seen with incentives and contests in this vertical. And I'm excited to see what the future brings. And I'm happy to be on your show again to talk about how your fleet's doing. And let's hope we can keep this momentum. Like I said, like the stock market, we might see a little bit of downward movement. And let's take that adversity and let's ramp it back up. Let's focus on the drivers that need the help and praise the drivers that are doing everything necessary to keep those scores high, those alerts low, and everybody safe on the road around them.
I think that's a good way to wrap it up, Adam. And the last thing that I want to look at and talk about very briefly is one of the things that we reviewed in preparing to have this conversation today. We reviewed our overall fleet score, and it's one of the metrics that we look at frequently. In the last 3 years that we've been using Netradyne, we've looked at that, and it's grown tremendously for the first year and a half, and we kind of plateaued, and we got to a point where we thought we were doing very, very well, and our fleet operated in a range from 905 to 920 for fleet score. So the Netradyne clients out there will understand what that means and how great that is. But since July 1, our fleet score has exploded up through the 920s and up to 937. And I think, we'll put a graphic up on the screen here and show that fleet score. But I think it does a really great job of summarizing all those ups and downs that you talked about in our specific metrics for the specific alert types. But the fleet score tells the whole story holistically. And the momentum has been nothing but up, not only through this contest, but throughout the years, over the 3 years that we've been using Netradyne. So we're at all-time highs for AIM, and we're really proud of where Netradyne helped us to get.
That's amazing, Ron. I mean, and that's a lot of hard work by you and your team, and especially your drivers. Drivers had to be involved and into it to get those kind of scores. So that tells me that, yep, there's a lot of back and forth between your team and the drivers' teams, but they're working together, and those types of scores are getting to best in class, which means that should relate to other things within the trucking world, whether that's claim costs, claim frequency, CSA scores, incidents, accidents, all of it. We hope that that translates over to better performance. And I'd like to point out too, the scoring metric that we use and that you have up on the board or showed us, is very interesting because it's unique to the industry and unique from our competitors in that we use a 1,000 versus 100, and it's important because there's more data. We analyze 100% of drive time. Very few people out there are doing that. And just like with athletes, you got to analyze everything to find out the root cause. Why am I getting base hits instead of home runs? Or why am I striking out instead of making contact with the ball? Or why can't I get the ball in the strike zone? All of these things, data and hardcore analysis has made it easier for everyone to analyze these types of behaviors. So for your drivers, we can kind of see those trends and we can coach to that versus kind of stabbing in the dark and saying, well, we should probably send a blanket notification about speeding and following distance. That's going to get you nowhere. If you talk about specifics and you talk to your individual drivers with some regular messaging and encouragement, I think that'll work a lot better. And you know where to focus when you know your numbers, which I know a lot of fleets run, and not many fleets know their numbers or look at the data the way that you folks do. And I think it's going to yield very good results for you and your team.
Yeah, we're excited about what the future holds, and we're definitely focused on the data and making sure that we're leading our conversations with the good things that the driver is doing in question. Regardless of what bad things are happening, we can always find something positive to talk to our drivers about, and we're really excited where it's bringing us. So I want to thank you, Adam, for spending some time with me, over the last few days to get this data together, and the analysis that you brought to us has been invaluable. We're going to definitely use that. We're going to carry it forward through this tournament and see where we end up. Well, I'm excited. In, I think, 3 weeks, we're going to crown a champion. So that'll be fun too.
I can't wait to see it.
We're going to get out the big checks.
Yes, I will be watching. I'll be excited to see how it pans out. Congratulations to you and your team, because everyone at AIM is a winner because of this.
Thanks, Adam.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me on, Ron.
Thank you.